Hello and welcome to this week's podcast where we're going to be talking invention and elite skills. So I have with me today on the sofa...
Mod Osborne, who is lead designer, which is weird to say.
Mod Moltare. I'm designing invention at the moment.
Mod Timbo, designer balance man, working on elite skills.
And I'm Mod MattHe, the resident sitting on the sofa podcast monkey.
Nice.
So, we got a lot of questions from the forums for this one specifically, so we try and cover off as many invention and elite skills questions as we could. In fact, I have pages and pages of them, as you can probably hear.
What's that, 20 sheets of A4?
It's about 20 sheets of A4, and that's an edited down version.
Astonishing.
We're not going to get through every question today, to be fair.
So about half of one of your feedback documents, Dave.
Boom. God damn it. I try to shorten it. I do trim it. Anyway, sorry. Keep going.
Mind boggles.
So, first question, Jose, I'm going to assume that's how you say it, asks, what inspired you to move from new skills to elite skills? And we're going to focus on elite skills first before we drill.
Yeah, that'd be grand. I think it's good to get a notion of what an elite skill is. Well, first of all, it's worth noting that we haven't moved away from new skills.
No.
Or the notion of skills at all. I think there's a kind of a worry in the community that elite skills are taking over. Nothing will be, from...
Nothing will ever be a skill again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And just want to kind of reassure there. But with the movement to elite skills, particularly with invention, when we were putting together that blog, it was clear that there were problems with doing invention as a pure skill, and that was the kind of the lower end that we would have to fill out with stuff that may or may not be used. Yeah. So when you race through the levels from, say, 1 to 60, 1 to 70 perhaps, there'll be a lot of content there that wouldn't see widespread use.
Right.
And invention is a skill, as its core design, that it greatly benefits the top-end skillers, top-end combat veterans, as it were. That we need more granularity of weapons, more kind of strategy on which weapon to take, because obviously there are optimal things to take at the moment. To take your dry gauze to combat, for example. We wanted to give players more choice and strategy across that band of weaponry, and that really only benefits kind of the top 20 skills?
Yeah.
The top 20 skill levels?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. It allows us to focus. But the problem is, if you just make that a skill update, then it loses that joy of levelling up through a skill, brings the whole community together, that sense of progress. And elite skills, which is kind of worth clarifying what elite skill is, I guess. I'll leave that to you.
Well, that's my next question, which will probably help you, is UX Killer asks, besides requiring other skills to start training elite skills, what's the difference between a new and an elite skill? So it leads straight into it.
Well, an elite skill does require at least 2 core skills to unlock, at least. About level 80-ish, I think we were sort of saying. But an elite skill is the end game for skillers. It is this expansion of skills, going from, if you can imagine, if you could expand level 80 to 99 in sort of content and levels across a whole new skill. That is exactly what elite skills is. It's this a really intricate, content-rich, complex, deep sort of skill, like invention, spread across so many different levels, instead of it just being like the end of smithing or the end of crafting. It's sort of like this richer, more heavier, interesting skill.
One of the best ways I've heard it described is you can almost change elite skill for combination skill.
Right.
Yeah.
What you're looking at is that this is a skill that requires 2 or more skills. In case of invention, we're looking at 3 at the moment. That may well change. But it requires you to have gained some progress in 3 skills before it becomes a skill. And it, to all intents and purposes, it's just the traditional skill once you've unlocked it. It still ranges, we're talking about this at the moment, but it still ranges from 1 to 120.
Yeah,
we've got at the moment, currently. So it ranges from 1 to 120. You're still unlocking this kind of level by level by level on an XP basis.
There's still experience,
experience. It's just that it's something you unlock at a higher level.
Okay.
Just as summoning required wolf whistle as a requirement in the old days, this skill, an elite skill, requires level 80 and 3 skills. Just as El City requires 75 in a number. What that means is that we can guarantee that anybody coming to it is going to be a veteran and a high-level player.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So, in fact, that answers Hellring's question, which was, are elite skills 1 to 99?
Yeah.
And the answer is no, they're 1 to 120.
1 to 120. But that was a conversation, we kind of bounced this backwards
this
and forwards
is still up in the air, really.
I think it's coming to rest on 120. I think what has driven this is a player expectation.
Ever since it was mentioned on stream, all we've ever seen is this sort of players like, is this going to be 120? 120 is our sort of
Yeah, you say elite, you say high level, you say end game, people are expecting 120.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's whether or not you go against that player expectation and go for 99 or go for something even smaller. That was what our initial discussions was, because I remember I was
50 or
pushing forward.
Yeah, 50, 30.
Yeah.
Someone suggested 9 skill levels at one point, obviously backed up by other progression mechanics as well, but the options were open.
But 120 sort of feels the sort of player expectation.
With 120, there's an obvious tension between that's a lot of levels and the amount of content that is in there. Yeah. So how can you populate 120 levels? And that's something that we've really talked about with elite skills. We want leveling up to mean more than just I unlock something new. Yeah. We've talked about kind of, it might refresh your cooldowns. It might unlock a certain amount of XP or a certain amount of energy or commodity or currency in the skill. It gives you more reason to train. Yeah. There are a number of things that you can do at level up. I know agility, for example, makes your run energy increase. There could be similar mechanics that work.
It's just the motivation to continue leveling and not sit on 60, 70, 80, 90.
Yeah.
We want people to keep advancing these elite skills and doing that through refreshing cooldowns and just making yourself better at whatever you're doing.
Exactly.
Your day-to-day activities are just better now you're a high level. So you want to keep continuing leveling your skill.
But for those who are looking for the amount of time it takes to level a skill from 1 to 120, we are looking at XP curves. Yeah. Want it to be more satisfying to level.
We can say it will be different from normal skills.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to start at 83 experience per level and end up at millions.
Yeah, 92 will not be half of the skill.
Yeah.
It will be another different number, but it will not be as exponentially harsh as it is right now.
Exactly, but it will feel like, in total, the length of a traditional skill.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But we're looking at better ways of for people to go beyond that max.
Right.
So they're the more kind of rewarding things than just putting a cap at 200 million XP and getting people to chase it.
It's the mastery at past 120.
Mastery past 120, we're actually kind of baking into it a little bit more.
Okay. So Frank's question was, will we see normal skills too in the future? Or will all future skills now be elite skills? He's waiting on sailing, apparently.
Well, elite skills, the reason we like Invention for an elite skill is because we can focus on the top levels. And that's what will differentiate. Is right, we've got a new kind of mechanic or behaviour we want to instill in the players. Is that better suited to something that's across all player levels? Or is that something that's better suited to our end game, end game content? And that is when you start deciding whether or not it's a new skill or deciding whether or not it's an elite skill. It might also be that we haven't completely given up on the notion of moving existing skills to 120 as well.
Yeah.
That's something we polled in the live stream. Still eager to find out what player feeling is on that.
But it's still not ruled out at all.
No, not at all. What Elite Skills does that is quite nice is that you can take something existing and go in slightly mechanically interesting new directions. So Invention is effectively smithing and crafting taken into a new kind of more granular, more strategy-oriented direction. I mean...
Yeah, more room to explore at the top end.
Yeah.
And at the top end there is more notional room to explore because players are more used to the underlying rules of the game. They've internalised those to a sufficient degree that there's sort of headspace to think further.
Yeah. And there's so many, I think elite skills might give the community more things to think about, like what could be an elite skill if you, with that filter, the idea of taking existing skills and extrapolating it out into weird directions. I've heard about necromancy, which could be prayer and magic, summoning into a new direction. You've got sailing, obviously, is a good one.
Sailing's a great one.
Yeah, we love
construction, agility, crafting.
Exactly, all filtering off,
cooking.
Going off in this direction. Yeah, why not? And the notion of, I've heard Slayer being kind of more finesse kills or making it harder for me to kill something, killing things barehanded, Can we go off in a new direction there? Why not?
Okay, yeah, well, Batian was asking, you say elite skills. So does that mean there are plans for more elite skills in the future?
One of the things I like about elite skills...
Going that way.
Yeah, is that potentially, this is another thing we're discussing, potentially it could mean that we do more skills in the future.
Right.
Because elite skills, okay, it's 1 to 120, but we're talking about different ways of levelling up, flatter XP curves, we're talking about different things other than unlocks that happen as you progress. It could mean that actually the cost of producing a skill is slightly reduced. So the kind of the frequency that reduced skill updates might be more frequent, and that's what we'd like.
If we can concentrate an elite skill on sort of systems, Invention is shaping up to be quite systems heavy. So a lot of unlocks to the procedure and gameplay of of training the skill, rather than you've reached a new level, here's a new object that you can build once and then forget about.
Right.
Which does mean that, from our point of view, from a perspective of building it, it does mean that you build the system once instead of building another 36 objects and chucking them in.
Yeah.
So it might be cheaper from a content developer production point of view.
Behind the scenes, we're being more forward thinking.
Yeah, exactly. We're building the framework right now of elite skills. Like, we are building this in mind with releasing more in the future.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't a one-off invention. This is we want
to live by these rules.
We want to be living those rules. We want to define what elite skills really mean, and then look to releasing more of these in the future.
Which is actually one thing that's worth mentioning, is that it is on my total skill level.
Yes.
It will be on my stat screen, with all my other skills. We want it to feel like another skill. The only difference is that kind of prerequisite unlock.
Yep.
Okay. So Jolly Roger says, don't you think skill reworks are more needed rather than a new skill?
That's a really good question. We haven't forgotten about skill reworks. I know that there are a number of people who are thinking, well, if you're doing invention, surely you need to do a smithing and mining rework as well, because there is some ties into it. Actually, the ties between smithing and, like, the smithing tiers and invention are loose. There aren't many connections there.
Yes, there are. Invention's got a limited number of inputs and outputs into its system. You take raw materials from elsewhere in the game to do things with, but you're not going to be spending much time, hammering things over an anvil, smithing style as such.
Yeah.
So it is slightly decoupled from that. The need for a smithing rework is sort of, you've got to consider the impact of how many players will get to use that versus how many players will get to use a new elite skill.
That's it. That's always a tough question with it.
That's what it boils down to.
A lot of players are already at the top end of smithing.
Yeah.
So while there is obviously value to doing a smithing rework, it doesn't affect as many people, or it doesn't have as big an impact as a new skill would.
Yeah.
But we're looking at the next year now in detail about the projects we want to do, and we're talking about, like, the skill reworks we want to add. We didn't get the chance to do one this year, but we really want to do one next year. So more news incoming on that. At the very least one, I would hope.
Okay, I think now we're going to start digging down into invention.
Good, let's do it.
So, Drakath says, the biggest pressing issue I have is how big an item sink will invention be, especially to tier 90 gear.
Oh, as in how much tier 90 gear will it remove from the game?
Yes.
That depends entirely on the numbers we plug in. We have not yet plugged in very many numbers at all.
Right.
I mean, invention is currently in the prototype stage, which we are building the systems themselves to make sure that they work and are fun to use.
Yeah.
How much of an item sink it is will then depend very much on how many raw materials you have to break up outside of the skill into components that you use within the skill to make one unit of output, so to speak. I mean, if upgrading your tier 90 weapon takes the bits from disassembling 200 existing tier 90 weapons and using their bits, then that's going to be more of an item sink than if it works out about 50. Yeah. So the reality is that we'll get the systems nice and solid, we'll get the effects working as we like them, and then we'll tune the economics behind it to be appropriate. That depends also in part on information we get from our boys in the business intelligence, game intelligence team, who can provide us with numbers like how many maple longbows enter the economy at any given time, how many dry gauze.
I can tell you that already. There are lots of maple longbows.
How many dry gore longswords per day net are we getting into the game?
But it is a core aim, isn't it? I mean, it's fair to say that
it is a core aim. We do want to sync out particularly existing weaponry and the sorts of things that are overproduced and lie around in bulk on the Grand Exchange or in people's banks. And for the latter in particular, we can sync tens of thousands quite easily. Because 10,000 maple longbows is a drop in the ocean. It'll become less so as people start breaking down tens of thousands of maple longbows and there isn't quite such a glut on the market, but that's the invisible hand for you.
But in terms of tier 90 equipment, you can be sure that you will be dismantling your tier 90 equipment to make your existing tier 90 equipment better, to whatever degree.
Right. So, okay. Then I'm going to inject this question. Runic Lord asks, how will invention affect current top tier gear? Will we perhaps see passive and special effects added to these items?
Yes. Hey. Without going too far into details, because this is a part that's still under discussion.
Yeah.
It is our intention that gear past level 75 or so your God Wars dungeon and up stuff, will have levelable engineering versions that, as you use them, they get better in generally passive ways. And at certain thresholds, you can apply perks to them by some means that is currently under some debate and undergoing some prototyping. What perks those are is down to you, but there is certainly the plan that you'll be able to improve those weapons in a manner of your strategic choosing.
So choose the direction it upgrades in, and also have the ability to use it to upgrade it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and possibly more wacky things like, while you're wielding this weapon, you take 20% extra damage from everything, but you deal 25% extra damage or similar.
Okay. We've been brainstorming all sorts of kind of additional perks and abilities that could be added, particularly to weaponry and gear. Well, we've had 2 brainstorms.
We've had brainstorms on the subject of the sorts of machines and contraptions and gizmos you could build, a little along the lines of the sort of perks that you can do.
Yeah.
We've got a smaller list of those so far, but I'm hoping that...
kind of want to mention one. Am I allowed to?
Go on, you know you want to.
like, for example, when it comes to gear, I really like the idea of weaponry that improves one particular ability.
Right.
So kind of tuning it to an ability that you want to kind of amplify a little bit. I really like that, and that's something that a kind of invention wants to take.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'll ask Lethal Intent's question then. I think we can probably ignore a little bit because we've covered it. But how far will the customization go with the gear we can create for ourselves for both combat and aesthetic purposes, which is why I thought we should mention it.
Aesthetic purposes are less likely to be a major focus,
right,
for 2 reasons. One, that to make a reasonable choice of aesthetic options requires building lots and lots of different things to make it look like.
Yeah.
And that means a lot of extra work for our modelers, who we're already going to be leaning on quite hard. I wouldn't say absolutely none, but it's not going to be the core. The second thing, of course, is that we've already got overrides in the game from Solomon's and from various other sources, like the Black Knight quest armor, that sort of mean that if you've got one of those active, no one's going to see your aesthetic option unless you take your aesthetically modified thing and put it in a keepsake slot and use that, which I think will reduce the amount of uptake we could expect on that. I would like to look into that direction, but I don't think it's going to be a big thing.
Yeah, our priority is making sure there's more, there are more perks or strategies that you can use with your weapon.
Mechanical benefits.
That's it. Than
cosmetic.
It will look different from a non-invented item. We're kind of working on that. We're kind of prototyping some stuff. Okay. But there won't be a huge swathe of different kind of items going through.
Neil Gicaffrey wanted to know, is the skill going to be buyable?
Technically.
To a degree it is, in as much as you've got to disassemble existing stuff to get the components to use.
And that was always going to be the case.
That's always going to be the case. So if you are sinking more items because you've bought all those items, then that's going to be a certain advantage. But there are other mechanics built into the skill that sort of gate that a little. There are some time-based gates. There are some... we're using mastery as a level of how much you've not only built all of these things, but used the levelable things, and how much experience you actually have with engaging with the stuff that you've created. It's not just buy 10,000 maple longbows off the GE, break them all down into bits, make 500 grenades out of it, and start again. Why you'd make grenades out of maple longbow bits, I don't know.
I like that though. That's a nice idea.
What, grenades made out of maple longbow bits?
Out of maple longbows, yeah.
Well, okay. you could
bear that in mind.
Turn the maple longbow into splinters and fill the grenades with splintered maple.
Oh,
that's true.
Splinter claymores.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that like a
scribbling this down? Like all done. Cheers.
There's no actual scribbling occurring.
I thought you only swept the office. I didn't realise you had ideas.
Shh! I have no ideas.
Certified member of DevCon right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hero of Iron asks, will Ironmen be held back at all, or will we be able to do everything invention related?
I certainly don't intend for Ironmen to not be able to engage with every part of the skill. Again, if it takes breaking down chunks
It'll be
of
much
things,
harder for Ironmen
then Ironmen who can't buy them all off the GE will, as Timbo says, take a little longer about it.
But then that makes it a huge goal for them to try to achieve.
It does.
The first 120 inventor on Iron Man.
But certainly no doors should be locked to Iron Man.
We're getting better at that, I think. I think just with each project that we come up with, Iron Man is being considered more.
Okay, a couple of lore questions.
Ooh.
Yeah. Will the Godless still be tied into invention in some way?
If so, gently.
Yes.
I think it used to be that the Godless were integral to invention. This was before, basically, invention when it was coming out close to divination.
Yeah.
It could be kind of tied into the 6th Age, a precursor to the 6th Age, perhaps. And so we could bring in the Godless at the same time as we brought them into the world events.
Yeah.
Now they've kind of been separated a little bit, and we've had better ideas for what the Godless could do. So the Godless haven't been forgotten. They've just been kind of stolen for something, not better, something else.
I would say that it's a better use for them.
Yeah.
To tie a faction into a skill implies that everyone is in support of that faction.
Yeah.
While I'd still like them to be a potential sort of customer for the things that you are pioneering your way through within the skill, I don't think we want to imply that everyone that does invention is a member of the Godless, or necessarily has all that strong sympathies towards them.
Damn right. So as you could probably guess, that means they're brought closer to story and therefore player choice. Next year. Perhaps.
So NWO Sharon says, do you have any plans for invention's background and its relationship with lore in the 6th Age? Clearly you do.
So obviously we're detaching Godless from invention a little. Then the Godless' story are going to be elaborated on, absolutely. Invention's story is an interesting one because it's less about story and more about theme with invention. The notion of kind of tech trees.
Yeah, we're theming it along the lines of sort of your basic tech, which uses divine energy very heavily, which there's your 6th Age link right there. Dwarven tech, we've seen in game, they use heavy metal, steam, clanky things. Goblins, cave goblins with their lightning, gnomes with their clockwork, elves with their crystal, terragut. Ooh,
could be one. Ogres as well. With
biological ogre biotech with the bellows and the frog balloons and all that sort of thing.
I love the idea of that.
So it's likely that we will think along those lines towards the story of it. It's certain that divine energy is a core component of pretty much everything. Instead of repairing things with money like you do with existing items, you will generally be powering them with batteries, more or less batteries. So we might not call them batteries, but
Guthix batteries.
But they use the Guthix juice,
double G batteries,
to power anything that happens to need power within this basic tech tree.
Yeah.
And so there is a 6th Age link there. There will be parties who are interested in it for that reason.
And of course, with any new skill, we'll try to kind of tie it into quest requirements, quest rewards. It may be that we could even do an invention quest. I really like the idea of an invention buyers and sellers kind of quest.
Yes, I quite liked the idea of the invention skiller boss that we had floating around. I don't know that we'll be able to include such a thing for launch.
Yeah,
given
that was
that
more
it's
porky, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, a certain amount of work involved in doing that, and a limited
invent a
budget.
boss, then defeat it, kind of thing.
No, it was described as build sort of robotic minions to fight the boss for you, and sort of tune what they are. Yeah. Choose, this one's supposed to be fast and go and pick up the things and bring it to a place. So I'll put these legs on it and light on the armor
attack.
So all that.
It's like Boss Simulator 2015.
So it'd be your own party that you're sending in there against the boss, and the better you do, the fewer bots you'll lose in the process, which obviously represents your risk versus
do some programming on
potential the reward. I quite like the idea. It's an idea.
Turning up with 50,000 noted use short bows.
Yep. Form your army.
Choking the boss on bits of paper that say you longbow on them. Shield bow. Sorry, I keep forgetting that.
Yeah, I know.
Is invention still a technological revolution? Asks Aquamancer.
I don't know if revolution is the right word. I think kind of a step.
It's a synthesis rather than anything else.
True.
You are an adventurer by the time you've got level 80 smithing, crafting and divination. One can presume that you have seen a certain amount of the world, the game world. You've encountered dwarven tech and goblin tech and divine energy and all of that sort of thing. And the start of invention is where that all clicks in your character's mind, I suppose, and you start thinking, well...
Smush it together?
Smush it together.
Why should we be limited to these various racial things when we can do so much better working together as one?
What a lovely message that is.
What a lovely message that is. And of course, the one who's working together as one is you.
I'm working with myself.
And with whoever else we happen to allow you to recruit for your guild of inventors.
A few, couldn't you? We won't say them now, but you could probably guess a few.
Yeah, there's names that spring to mind.
Yeah.
So, how much influence will be drawn from the materials used to make an item?
I don't want every single item in the game to break down to its own component.
Unique, imagine that.
So,
maple shield bow components.
The approach that it looks like we're taking at the moment, and the basis on which we have been prototyping, is that materials will come in rarities, common, uncommon, and rare, for the sake of argument. We've been calling them components, parts, and essences so far.
Yeah.
So the notion that you would break down any given wooden longbow, and that you could pretty much expect it to give you wooden components, bits of wood that you can repurpose for something, and you're going to end up with quite a lot of those probably, and any given recipe is going to require quite a lot. It'll likely also mean that you'll get tension parts and support parts and sort of the slightly less common things that you'll maybe get one or two of per breaking things down that are slightly more complex. Sword hilts, bits of blade, that sort of thing, a little more refined than the previous. And then at the top end, something that you might not get for several breakings down at a time, the very essence of what something is as a component.
Right.
We didn't want it to end up that this was an entirely physical-based skill, because there's enough sort of divine energy and stuff floating around that there's a certain metaphysical bent to it. So you might break down a potion and get an essence of healthiness. You might get the very essence of sharp out of breaking down a sword. You might
you could break up a fish and get its organic.
You could break down a fish and get organic components. And healthy essence out of it.
Yeah.
You know,
healthy essence.
That sort of thing. Essence of being healthy. Yeah, that's what fish does. You eat a whole, it heals you.
Essence of life.
Essence of life, possibly. It doesn't sound as good as essence of
No, it doesn't.
healthy.
You're right. Essence of healthy sounds better.
Yeah, far better. And so we will most likely end up with maybe a dozen different types of any given component part and essence that everything will funnel into.
Right, okay. Runic Lord asks, do you expect to have invention released in multiple batches?
Yes.
Yeah, so we...
That's that, yeah.
Wow! Whoa, out the bag. We kind of break it up according to tech tree. We really like that. At the moment, and the notion that initial batch would give you everything you need to level to 120, I think.
Yes, I wouldn't propose that we put an unlocked thing at every level, as we were saying before, that while you can continue to get these systematic upgrades as you level the skill, we don't want to fill in your skill advance guide entirely all at once, because that sort of leaves us with very little wiggle room. What we would like to do is start off with your basic divine energy inventions and maybe the dwarven and the goblin stuff, and then come back to it later with the gnomish clockwork and the elven crystal, perhaps, and that's a new batch. And then
right, okay, as you learn how to smoosh the next section in.
That's it. Yeah, and each of those tech lines would give you slightly different mechanics. There'll be a different mechanical feel to each of them. Okay, is the intention.
So Asu wanted to know about max and completionist requirements.
There will be some.
It's a skill.
Yeah, the rules will be largely the same as when we launch any skill.
Yeah, you'll need to be 120 if we can wear anything again.
Yeah, that's it. So nothing changes, I'm afraid.
Since we mentioned the mastery earlier, this sort of, it's not just about grinding one thing for all of the levels. You've also got to use the things that you make and sort of experience them that way. I imagine that getting full mastery will be a requirement as well. So unlocking and using everything.
It might well be a trim.
Probably a trim.
Yeah,
probably a trim rack.
Yeah.
Which would be
talking about that.
Be a hefty one.
Yeah. We haven't talked about any kind of grace periods on trim or comp. It would be unlikely, I would imagine, that we'd have a grace period.
Yeah.
I'm afraid.
That's a new skill.
Ooh.
I'm Rubik says, would we have to have a complete alternative tab for elite skills?
No.
If
we did that would kind of... I get the feeling that people would think it's like sagas are to quests. It's something secondary. It's not as important as a quest.
Yeah.
Really want to kind of show what it is, which is integrated into the main game world. It's really important. It's a main game skill. It levels like a normal skill. It should attach to the total skill level. It should have its own skill cape. It should, in every conceivable way, be considered a skill. Maybe even considered more than a skill because it's so dense with high level content. Yep. This is considered that elite skill.
Yeah, my UI brain certainly suggests that as a skill it belongs with the other skills.
It might be coloured differently, perhaps.
If it needs to stand out, then it gets a different border or a different button colour. But
it would certainly be greyed out if you'd have the requirements to even start the skill.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's to avoid confusion.
So a couple more technical questions.
Ooh,
getting into technical stuff.
I'll go and get Mod Olo.
So, apparently we've talked about maker's stamps almost on the items.
Yes.
So Cyndaquil has asked, how do we go about achieving this considering the current limits on the nature of items?
I have made no mention of this being a thing in the current iteration of Invention.
So it was mentioned in the polls. Wasn't top. But so the customization, the notion of my name being attached to this and me trading it with somebody and having that name on it is something that we've seen as not as important for launch.
Okay.
That's something that we kind of just leave it to the wayside, I think. Yep. What's important to us is to give that kind of real strategy and gear, strategy and items.
It's to give that level of granularity for the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Machiavelli asks, when do we plan to allow things like lamps and treasure hunt keys to be used on the new skill?
This is something that's elite skill wide. So I think we can talk a little bit about this. Some of the important things that we want to do with elite skill is to make it so that there is a greater period before you can gain bonus XP in it.
Yep.
So we're looking at a 3-month period at the moment.
3-month amnesty of bonus experience and lamps.
And one of the interesting things we're looking at is that prismatic lamps
don't work with elite skills.
Don't work with elite skills. So if you are given that choice of which skill to add bonus XP or XP into, it won't be in an elite skill.
Right, okay.
So that gives it a bit more exclusivity, a bit more difficulty to level. You still gain lamps in Invention.
Yeah.
But they will be purely Invention lamps.
Okay.
And stars. So that's what we're trying to do to give it a bit more exclusivity.
And it'll be hard to convert existing XP rewards into this new XP curve as well.
Yeah.
So the Wild Gothic Sleep experience, for example, couldn't easily translate over to Invention experience.
You've got it.
So it's very unlikely to work with elite skills.
Okay. So Malice Alice asks, player interest in Invention as a skill clearly said no, thank you. Why have you decided to go through anyways?
I think it's unfair to say that clearly there was no interest in Invention. I went up against Elf City, which is a tough call. We saw the reaction to Elf City. Elf City was quite, people wanted a new location. It's been clear that exploration...
It was even a fairly close poll as well.
It was pretty close.
It was pretty close. It wasn't cut and
It wasn't
dry.
it wasn't a landslide for
55-45?
Something like that,
Yeah.
And the way I see it is that Invention is almost our choice because we've looked at what the game needs and we really do feel that Invention is kind of what the game needs. There's this little kind of fatigue, getting a sense of a potential fatigue at a high level of using the same items, having the same loadouts, just going through a slight routine with fighting. Yeah. And that shouldn't be the case with high-level mobs or high-level bosses. It shouldn't be a routine. It'd be really good if players were always hungry to get that next best item that would be perfect on the boss they love.
Yeah.
And Invention gives us that. Obviously, there's a question of, okay, we are adding more weaponry and strategy in that. What do we then do? Do we offer more strategy and choice in the creatures we fight as well? That's another question that we need to answer after this.
Yeah.
But it's Invention I see is us realising what the game needs.
Okay.
Don't know if you want to add to that.
No, that seems perfectly fair to me. That in particular, we do want to expand your options of ways of fighting up at the top end, And then also we want to increase the threats that you're facing at the top end, because at the moment they don't really warrant the full-on sort of tweak and tune that we want to give you the toolbox for.
Yeah.
And doing that through elite skills allows us to give that sort of leveling experience in a skill to high-level players without having to...
That's it. And it signals the start of elite skills, which is exciting because players, have got ideas of what could be an elite skill, this combination skill. It gives more leveling things to do at high level. It's really exciting to me. And you'll start to see, when we're talking about the new kind of mobs and new bosses, you'll see updates coming out before Invention and after Invention that really kind of fit that mould.
Yeah.
So start looking out for those.
Okay. So final question, and this one's from me. What elite skill would you most like to see added to the game for each of you?
Scumbag. We're all going to pick the same one, aren't we?
We are. I think we are.
So I'm going to have to come up with something different.
I'm going to make one up on the spot.
Okay, all right, I've got one. All right, I'll start off with, I really like, so there's been talk about almost kind of a Slayer for skills.
Right.
That notion of you are... Damn it. Is that the one that you were
That was the one I was going to go.
You can choose the obvious one. I've got one on my own.
So I'm given a task of creating a certain number of items. I go and complete that. That levels me up in that skill, but also helps me to level up. It gives me objectives for the other skills.
Right, okay.
Like in the same way Slayer does for raising my combat levels.
Yes.
So that's a nice one that I've heard.
Okay.
I know that it's the safe and easy choice.
Are you going
for some
hackneyed?
people. Ever since I built ports, alongside Mod Raven and alongside Mod Edam, I've wanted to go to the Eastern Lands and see them and walk on them. So I can't not pick sailing.
Okay.
Just the opportunity, if such a skill presented it, to go and sail around Washanka would be unmissable.
Okay.
Plus all of the, tinkering at your ship and recruiting a crew and executing them for insubordination at sea.
I really want a Mass Effect crew style. You've got your crew, you've got specialized
to know
crew,
them.
Yeah, go on loyalty missions, know their story, ins and outs.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I really want from sailing.
And now your choice, because you can't pick sailing?
I really like the idea of like a trading skill. So like a player-owned shop, trading, building up an empire, building up the East India, more like the West player trading company sort of idea, like building your own things, running an empire, maybe that sort of thing. Like physically building a shop with construction and trading and producing your own items. And
that's nice. Yeah, that is good.
I quite like that.
Building a trading empire.
And then your own Grand Exchange. That's your ultimate goal.
Exactly. Maybe you can undercut the Grand Exchange.
Oh, nice. I want to do heists as well. Can we fit that in?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for coming in, guys.
No, thank you for having us.
Yeah,
and
great.
Looking forward to seeing all those lovely elite skills.
Yeah, look out
elite
for a player
skills.
design document on it, on Invention Scene.
Yeah, working on that now.
Brilliant. Right, and bye to everyone listening.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.